So good evening, everyone. And so we'll start with a short breathing, mindful breathing exercise to quiet our mind. Then we can reflect and contemplate, life is very short. Even though sometimes it feels life is long, life is very short. Time passed by very quickly. So we have to make most of it in this short lifetime and make it meaningful. And the best way to make our life meaningful is really to practice the Dharma. There's nothing more meaningful, beneficial for oneself and to others than really practice the Dharma. Not only practicing the Dharma, but to be able to practice the Bodhisattva's way of life. And if we engage in the practice, the Buddha's way of life, we can be most benefit to all sentient beings, directly, indirectly, through our body, speech, and mind. And we can find our own inner peace, joy, happiness. So it brings benefit to others and oneself. And not just short-term benefit, but long-term, lasting benefit. And in order to practice the Buddha way of life or Mahayana path, Mahayana Dharma, we need to be reminded of the practices. We need to be continue to study, learn about those practices. For that very reason, that is why we are here. And may our act of coming together, listening to the Dhamma, engaging in discussion, reflecting, contemplation, may all of that become cause conditions to actualize the Buddhahood as quick as possible, so we can liberate all sentient beings, not only from temporary problems and suffering, but from the very root of, very cause of all the suffering, and lead them to ultimate happiness. Okay.
Page 73, the first verse once. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Page 76, the Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on a mass of vultures mountain in Rasgiriya, together with a great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activities of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not division, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation in the path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in perfection and wisdom, the mind without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, in the reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that totally pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Aryavalokita Shora, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Aryavalokita Shora, and those surrounding the entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, Gandhavas, were overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavan.
98, or the bottom of 97, the short mandala offering. Sashipeke
Chonshimeto Tariraleshi Nyime Jempade Sangye Shintu Mite Uwai Dokun Tashin La Chubasho Etam Gurudana Mandalakam Niyatayami.
Refuge in Bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodan Soki Chonamo Chanchu Bardu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chonen Gepe Sonamki Drolap and Chair Sangye Drupasho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonama Chanchu Bardu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chonen Gepe Sonamki Drolap and Chair Sangye Drupasho.
Kanje Ruja Nirone, Dao Tunje Pambeja, Tambeja Netunjebe, Kodam de la Chatsa. So we have gone through a Lama Tsongkhapa explained, in order to achieve fully enlightenment, we need to cultivate the awakened mind of bodhicitta, and having cultivated the bodhicitta mind, then even though it's very powerful and wonderful to have that such a warm heartness or good heart of loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind, and even though that will make our life so much meaningful, and even though that will bring us so much benefit in terms of, incredible level of inner strength, confidence, courageous. inner peace, in terms of to be able to deal with a lot of challenging situations because of the bodhicitta mind, to be able to transform in a better to be able to transform those difficulties into something positive on the path, as well as by having the bodhicitta to be able to purify so much negative karma, and to be able to accumulate merit easily all the times. Even though there's so much of all of those benefits, but unless we engage in the practice such as six perfections, still you will not be able to achieve the full enlightenment. And so therefore, on the basis of that bodhicitta mind attitude, then we should engage in the practice of six perfections. And so then we just went through it before we go detail, Tsongkhapa explaining why particularly the six perfections, and he gave many different reasoning why those six practices are crucial from many perspectives. And I think we are on page number 158. And I think where it is saying transitions, where the number is specific from the point of view of accomplishing the two welfares. So so why six perfections, even though there are so many different practices, even though there are so many bodhisattvas practices, but why specifically six numbers in terms of that? And then here explaining in terms of accomplishing one own welfare and in terms of accomplishing others' welfare, according to that, then why those six perfections are needed, And so that is where it's because when we train in the bodhisattva path, or practice or train in bodhisattva path, the purpose of engaging bodhisattva path or training in bodhisattva contact or path or practice is in order to fulfill the welfare of others as well as your own welfare, in order to fulfill all sentient beings' welfare. And when we talk about all sentient beings, then there's others and yourself. And so including all sentient beings. So in order to fulfill all sentient beings' happiness and welfare, we need the practice of six perfections. And that is why, and then where it says in the actual topic, how the first three of six perfections bring about the welfare of others, and then the last three bring the welfare of fulfilling welfare of oneself, and together six, then it fulfills the welfare of all sentient beings, oneself and all sentient beings, other sentient beings, So in order to fulfill, and accomplish and fulfill the well-being of other sentient beings, there are many ways of fulfilling others' needs and welfare and happiness, temporary and ultimate, So one way of helping and benefiting others, temporarily well-being, happiness, is to be able to provide the material things that who lacks material things, necessary basic needs, and there where we can be able to practice the giving and generosity of the whatever material needs that someone needs. And therefore, the practice of generosity is needed in order to fulfill those sentient beings who lack those basic necessities for their, their survival, for their well-being, for their happiness. And so, therefore, the practice of generosity is required. But if you practice generosity while harming them, then it's contradictions. One way you are trying to help by your practice of generosity, on other way you are harming them in different ways. And therefore, in order to be your practice of generosity even more beneficial and more helpful, so we should be able to practice without hurting and harming them. And in order not to hurt and harm them, then you need a practice of moral discipline that refrain, that restrain from hurting and harming through your body, speech, and mind, and then with the three doors. So when you are able to practice help with generosity while not harming them, then you are able to help and benefit them more, and not having that contradictions, And so therefore, when you are able to do that, then it brings much more joy and happiness. Because, if we practice, while we practice generosity, it makes them happy. But if you harm them, it makes them unhappy. So, it hurts. So, but when you don't harm them through practice of moral discipline, and at the same time you practice generosity, then it gives them more happiness, more joy, and without harm, So therefore, moral discipline or ethical discipline is necessary. So second, moral discipline is the second practice of perfection or paramita. How, and then while you are trying to not hurt and harm them through restraining and refraining from hurting and harming others through your three doors, and engage in practice of generosity, but maybe if they respond in a negative way and try to, instead of being grateful for your actions, if they instead try to hurt you and harm you for whatever reasons, if we retaliate, harming them back for what they have done to us, then you will not be able to perfect your ethical discipline. Then your ethical discipline is not to restrain from harming and hurting others. So because someone hurt you or harm you, and if you started to respond or retaliate in same way, then your practice of moral discipline will not be completed, perfected. You will break that moral discipline. And therefore, you need the patience, So if you have the patience, that is not being disturbed by someone's harmful behavior. And so when your mind is not disturbed, then you don't retaliate and you don't try to hurt and harm them back. By doing that, then, you are able to perfect and accomplish your moral discipline, as well as your practice of patience, as well as your practice of generosity become more beneficial. And therefore, that way, you don't hurt and harm them, Again, as it says here, when it is easy to be patient when someone tries to be nasty to you one time. But when it keeps repeating 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, then it becomes more challenging to become patient, Then we become impatient and we lose our mind, And then that is when we started to become a negative. Our mind become more negative, and then we start to retaliate in a harmful way, And when we do that, then we are unable to, keep our moral discipline correctly and undiluted and without breaking them. And so therefore, in order to that, with the patience is needed. And if we practice patience, and if we don't respond and retaliate with harm for harm back to them, then one, also, we stop them. One, we by doing that, one, we stop creating negative karma ourselves, And also, it prevents others from creating more negative karma. If I harm them back, they will be upset, angry, and they will try to retaliate and respond in a negative way. So then we make them create more negative karma. So we create negative karma, and we make them create more negative karma. On the other way, when we practice patience, we don't suffer, and we don't create more negative karma, and also we stop them from creating more negative karma due to our such response, And being inspired by that, because you don't respond, even though they try to hurt you and harm you, but because instead you treat them with loving kindness, compassion, if not loving kindness, compassion, at least with patience, not retaliating harm, hurting them back, then they will eventually be inspired by that. They will be touched by that, thinking, even though I have been so mean to that person, he or she is being so gentle, so kind, People's mind has to change. Sometimes it takes more time for some people to realize that and to change. Some people will realize that earlier, they can see, and then they begin to change their mind, How can I be so mean even when I'm trying to mean, they are not being so mean back to me, and they come to realize that, and they will be very inspired by that. And so, and by being inspired by that, they will be inspired to engage more virtues themselves, to become less mean, to treat others less mean, to treat others with a less mean and less cruelty, and to treat others with more patience, more understanding, more compassion. And that way, inspire them to apply the virtues. And because of that, then it brings a great benefit to all others, And that is what we want to, not to be able to benefit them temporarily through help of, whatever wealth, medicine, whatever physical help that we can give. At the same time, to be able to change their mind, inspired to change their mind, to become more virtuous. And sometimes those are the best teaching that we can do. The best teachings that one can give to anyone is through examples, through your practices. And they're being inspired by that. And because of that, they actually want to follow that path, then it's really coming from their heart, not being forced by anyone, not being kind of, and so that way, that's how we can help and benefit others, short-term, long-term, in that way. And that will, because they inspired virtues and because they continue the virtues, and then they will make more and more progress on their path. And as they make more and more progress on their path, the closer and closer they get to the enlightenment. And then, what brings about one's own welfare, the next three paramita perfections fulfills our own welfare, And of course, our own welfare is to achieve happiness of liberations or enlightenment, That's the highest level of the everyone, every sentient beings, including ourselves, wish to be happy and do not desire any suffering or pain. Innately, that is how we all feel. And that is what all we strive for. Every sentient being strive for happiness. And not only temporary happiness, to real ultimate happiness, lasting true ultimate happiness. And that is the liberation of fully enlightenment, And that comes through the practice, power of realization of wisdom that realizes the ultimate truth. So that the practice of wisdom is one of the perfections, the 6 perfections, So in order to achieve either individual liberations, happiness of individual liberation, or happiness of fully enlightenment, the wisdom realizing emptiness is necessary. And so therefore that practice is needed. And in order to have that wisdom, the special insight, then we need to have the shamatha, the calm abiding mind, the meditative concentrations that is able to stabilize your mind fully without any distractions, steady, and with the alertness to the objects of your meditations. So you need the foundations of the shamatha for that special insight. And so therefore, the practice of meditative concentrations, or shamatha, which is the 5th paramita, so that is needed, And in order to, in order to have your mind, plenty, the flexibility and plenty to be able to remain on the object of your meditations with a total focus, without distractions, and with a blissfulness, and that to be able to remain that, as much as you wish, for hours, even days, to do that, then you need, in order to have that kind of shamatha, then you need a joyous effort in your practice, perseverance in your practice. And so that is the 4th perfection, paramita perfection. So these 3 are needed for and not only for these, all are needed, not only for our own happiness and welfare, also happiness of all sentient beings as well. But when we divide in that way, it can be divided in others in oneself, but actually those wisdom are also needed for the happiness of all others, if you want to lead them to fully enlightenment, liberations, and those are needed. And also how joyous effort becomes the foundation of both welfare, one's own welfare and others' welfare, as says, of course, if we are lazy and if we don't put any effort, perseverance in our practice, we cannot achieve anything anyway. And definitely not a spiritual realizations and inner peace and happiness, And so therefore, in order to achieve those happiness, then you need a joyous effort and perseverance in your practice, in your virtues. And so therefore that kind of perseverance is basis and the foundations for all other five perfections. And so that is in order to fulfill the wishes of oneself and others, then wise six paramita is needed. And then I think, so Lama Tsongkhapa explaining that when he's saying he's not just making himself, it's based on some of the teaching that you find in, Ornament of Mahayana Sutra by Maitreya. And so he quote the quotation from that sutras for the explanation he just did, And in terms of that, then Lama Tsongkhapa saying, this does not compromise welfare of all others in all aspects, in saying these are the kind of roughly some of the benefit that we can fulfill others' welfare and our welfare. It doesn't mean that all the welfare that we can do are all here, it's just kind of some aspect of that. So that is, and then Lama Tsongkhapa explaining from the sutra in that quotation where they says in the third line, abiding liberations, and explaining what that means. Abiding here means your mind abiding single pointedly to the object. That means the meditative concentration, shamatha. Liberation here refers to wisdom, because wisdom is that which lead to the nirvana, the liberations. And so therefore, from the nirvana, liberation from the samsara, and so, and then here Lama Tsongkhapa explains those two, abiding and liberations, should be distinguished to different mind, not one. So distinguishing the abiding as a shamatha, meditative concentration, and liberation as the wisdom, and not to mistaken the special insight, the wisdom, and the shamatha to be one, or shamatha to be special insight. And then accomplishing the welfare of others in all aspects in the next page, So again, it's a little bit similar. I already explained it, but slightly different, which he already explained now already, but it's very slightly different. It's almost like very similar. And so by practicing the, generosity, by giving the material things necessaries, so then you eliminate their suffering of poverty, their suffering of poverty. And so therefore you provide them the happiness of having to survive, having to have enough, and all of that, So the suffering, it eliminates the suffering of poverty and give them happiness from that. And after following that, because by practicing the moral discipline or ethical discipline, then you do not hurt and harm other sentient beings. Not only you help them, that you don't hurt and harm them. Okay. Not only that, even you don't hurt and harm them, but if they try to hurt and harm them, through practice of patience, you don't try to harm them back. And so through practice, with the practice of moral discipline, you try not to hurt and harm them. But even you try not to hurt and harm them, if they try to hurt and harm them by not responding back in a harmful way, therefore, through the practice of patience, so then you do not harm them no matter how they respond, no matter how they react to you, no matter how they act to you. And so and in that way, you are not, you are helping them, fulfilling, not to make them suffer, and by making them not to suffer, you are providing them peace and happiness, And since, they are like our companions, because when we engage in the Bodhisattva path, we see all of sentient beings as your own parent, as your own children, as your own friend, and as your best friend, companion. And through that practice, then we try to, day and night, we engage into the joyous effort in trying to help, in trying to benefit, and in trying to not to hurt and harm them, day and night, we try to put as much effort as possible, not to hurt them as much as possible, not only not hurt and harm them, trying to help and benefit them as much as possible, and putting effort, even sometimes when it's not easy. And it's not easy, when we try to help them and when they are acknowledging and when they are, nice to you, it's easy for us to help them. But it's very difficult when they don't respond in that way, and instead they respond in a negative way. Then we can easily be discouraged and give up being a nice, being a kind, and trying to be helpful. We can easily, and not only that, we can easily become nasty ourselves. Then we become nasty ourselves. We become cruel, and we treat them with more nasty and cruelty way, And so joyous effort is needed to continue to practice and not to give up, And then in order to be more helpful and beneficial and fulfill others' needs, then we try to rely on meditative stabilization or shamatha or karma abiding. And when you have karma abiding, shamatha, you have completed and perfected the power of mindfulness and introspections. And because you have so strong mindfulness and introspections, when someone act in certain way, either to yourself or someone else, which can disturb your mind, agitate your mind, when you have strong mindfulness in that, if those negative emotion arises due to someone's actions and behavior, attitude, immediately, you recognize immediately before it's become a big, even just, and then through your mindfulness, you wouldn't allow that spark to become a flame, when there's a spark of agitations, there's spark of frustrations, there's spark of resentment, there's spark of anger. But because of your strong mindfulness, introspections, you know how to distance yourself and not to engage that thoughts, that emotions, and therefore you don't allow that spark to become a flame. In that way, again, if it doesn't become a flame, then you wouldn't reach a point where you started to harm others, and so that way also you can be it's helpful not to hurt and harm yourself and others. Here, mostly from the perspective of others, because we're talking about accomplishing others' welfare. And also, as a foundation, that shamatha or kamma as a foundation, then someone can develop many psychology, psychic powers. Here is the magical emanations. Psychic powers, different many powers, and through the different psychic power, you can be more beneficial and helpful to others. Yeah, to be able to, through that psychic power, to be able to read their past and futures, to be able to see, and through that seeing, then you are able to help and benefit there, because you can see past and future, so you see the bigger picture, so everything, so you are able to help benefit us in that way. In some of them, you can read their mind to certain degrees, and therefore being able to read someone's mind to a certain degree, then you have better tools to help them, because you know what's going in their mind. And so therefore, a lot of time, even we try to help someone, because we can't read their mind, it's hard to benefit. We can't see past and future, so it is hard to benefit in long term and all of that, So when you have that kind of psychic power, then you can be able to help help more others. And in order to have those, such as clairvoyance, psychic power, you need the foundation of kamma shamatha to develop such power. And so therefore, and through that, providing whatever they wish for, and and through all of that practice, when they become, ready and suitable for the to to understand the reality, the teaching of reality, through all of that, then you try to give them good explanation of the nature of reality, and they are ready now. Their mind is ripened, and they are become a right vessel to understand. And from their side, they are ready. And then from your side, if you are able to give the right explanation, then they can get it, they can grasp it, and then it sinks them. And through then they can have a realization of wisdom. And having a realization of wisdom, then they can offer their own defilement, their own delusion, source of all their sufferings and problems, And so, and so therefore, when they are ready, and when you are able to give the right, correct explanation, good explanations, then whatever doubt they might have about the reality can be cleared, and they have correct understanding. And through that correct understanding and the wisdom, then you will be able to help them to liberate themselves from all the delusions. And by being able to help them to liberate from all the delusions, then you help them to liberate from all the suffering and the samsara. And because of that, then again, that is why, again, the sixth perfection for that purpose. So again, you can see through different practice, you are able to help them temporarily to the ultimate, temporarily to solve their the suffering of poverty, to ultimate problem of overcoming all the delusions and the suffering, and to have the happiness of ultimate liberations, And the six perfections help us to help them to have many different to solve different level of suffering, and to help them to lead to different level of happiness, from more temporary and more samsaric kind of health and happiness to more ultimate happiness of that. So then there is the quotations again to authentify what Lama Tsongkhapa explained Again, it's from the same materials, ornament of the sutra, all these quotations that Lama Tsongkhapa has taken. And so again, I would not kind of read that, because if you read that, the explanation already given by Lama Tsongkhapa earlier. Sometimes he quote, and not only Lama Tsongkhapa, many teachers also do. Sometimes they do the quotations and then they explain the meaning of that. Sometimes they give the meaning of the quotation first, and then they quote the quotations. So in these cases, most of them first he give the explanation, and then he recite the quotations of that. And so you can actually find, if you have read the explanation, then you can see the quotation, how it fit there. Then the number specific from point of view of comprising the entire Mahayanas, all the Mahayana teachings, in terms of that, why it is explained, So if we don't have attachment to material things, resources, or material things, which you already have acquired, for whatever, through your own hard work, or you inherited, that material wealth you might have inherited from whatever, or you might have worked hard to acquire that, accumulate that, and if you don't have attachment to them, so if you practice generosity, if you practice generosity and train your mind of giving, sharing, then you will have less attachment and grasping to the material that you have already acquired. Okay? So you have less attachment to it through the training your mind to share, to give. Because attachment is clinging and grasping, not wanting to let it go. Whereas practice of generosity is to let it go, to give, to share. Those two minds are contradictions. So when you have this mind of generosity, wanting to give, wanting to share, you wouldn't have same level of clinging and grasping. And therefore that you wouldn't have attachments. And not only that, you will not have craving, strong desire to acquire more wealth in the future, less attachment to not only you have, but less craving and attachment to what you don't have and want. Whereas if you don't have that, then, if we have strong attachments, not only I'm attached to what I already have, but then I have attachment and craving for more and more, what I don't have now, But when you practice generosity, then that becomes kind of like some level of antidotes towards that attachment to the object that you have already acquired, and to antidote to the attachment to objects that you have not acquired, but you might be craving for and wanting that. And when that kind of, when you don't have attachment, okay, through the practice of generosity, when you don't have attachments to the objects like that, then you will be able to train your mind to keep and guard your moral discipline, and thereby you will have a much more respect and stronger practice in relation to your practice of moral discipline. For example, a lot of time, the reason why we are unable to observe and keep our precept, our vows, and our moral discipline is a lot of time is attachments. It is due to attachments. People take lives of others due to attachments. Steals due to attachment, a lot of time, engage in sexual misconduct due to attachments. A lot of time we lie due to attachments, you know. And so sometimes, again, we use divisive speeches because of attachments and all of that. So a lot of those negative, a lot of those engaging into non-virtuous actions, not being able to restrain and refrain from engaging in non-virtuous actions, is due to attachments. When you don't have any more attachments, it's easy to keep our precept. It's easy to refrain from engaging in 10 non-virtuous actions. It's easy to engage in 10 virtuous actions. And so therefore, that practice of generosity help for practice of your moral discipline, you know. To your practice of moral discipline become more stronger, more better. And due to the patience, you know, when we have patience in relation to the sufferings, you know, that arises either due to sentient beings or non-sentient beings. Of course, due to sentient beings, sometimes we become impatient, frustrated, angry. Due to sentient beings' behavior, attitude, actions, and so forth. Or sometimes, and some, not only that, you know, due to such, we not only become frustrated, angry, and disturbed, also we become very discouraged, you know. You feel hopeless, you know, to see such people's behavior, attitude, and actions. You become discouraged about, you know, so many things. People lose hope to humanity, hope to sentient beings, and become very discouraged. It can become. And sometimes not sentient beings, sometimes it is just different things due to our challenge with our health situations, you know, due to challenge with our financial situations, due to challenge with our own emotions, due to challenge with so many different things that could manifest and arise in our life. And we become very impatient with that. We become very frustrated with the situation, with things, either with the situation itself, sometimes with ourselves. We become very impatient and frustrated and angry and discouraged and hopeless and all of that, you know. But if you have practice of the patience, if you have a strong practice of patience, if you have strong practice of patience, then we will not be so frustrated. We will not be so angry. We will not be so discouraged due to all different, whatever different circumstances, situations that we might encounter. So it helped to overcome hopelessness, discouragements, and frustrations, and anger, and hateful, and all of that through the practice of patience. And patience is one of the main, even though all these 6 perfections are part of crucial, very essential point of practice of Mahayana path, but especially patience is even more crucial. Because bodhisattvas, the bodhisattvas one is to cultivate, you know, true loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta to all sentient beings equally, without being biased, partial, discriminating, you know. But when you have anger, then it is hard to have compassion, love, and bodhicitta mind toward that persons or that sentient beings whom we are angry about in that moment. So it becomes an obstacle for loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind towards that sentient beings when you have anger towards that sentient beings. And that become obstacles, main obstacle for cultivating love, compassion for that person. And so in order to overcome that kind of thing, the patience is important and needed. In the other point, the bodhisattvas path, when they engage, they try to help and benefit sentient beings and not to hurt and harm. But when you are impatient, and when you become impatient, frustrated, and angry, then the chances of you being very harmful and hurtful to others increase very highly, becoming more violent when you have angry due to impatience. And again, you often see, as I give an example, we see very clear many times on the road. Very often people become very rages, road rages, for example. You often hear road rages. Why is that? Because people are impatient. Because they couldn't wait 5 seconds, 1 minute. It's just that impatience make them to become so angry and wretched, and that put their life and others' life in danger. And many people have lost life because of that. And that comes from impatience. If there is a patience, that will not allow to be so angry and so wretched that way and put others' life and your life in a danger. So when you have that, then definitely you will be not discourage all of that. And then when we engage in the practice of joyous effort, when you apply yourself, to the practice of joyous effort in the virtues, and there is a joyfulness, delightfulness, pleasantness in your practice instead of being burdened, stressed out with your practice and your virtues. And when there is that, then of course, you will not be so lazy. You will not be so discouraged. Because you have strong interest, delight, joy in that. It is when we don't have that joyfulness, then we lose the interest and then slowly become discouraged and slowly give up the practice. At the very beginning, you are interested, after some time, that joy is gone. The joyfulness is no more in terms of studying the Dharma, in terms of meditating, practicing. And when there is no joy, slowly you lose the interest. And when you have no interest, then slowly you give up. And so that is true to any kind of virtues. And so therefore, but on other hand, when you have so much joyfulness, then their interest is automatically, there is interest. There is joyfulness, interest, then nothing can stop you. Even someone say, please don't meditate, you need to go to sleep. Like Lama Soba, even though he has been advised by the doctors, advised by some of his teachers and all of them that he need to sleep, he doesn't go to sleep because the practice gives him the joy, more joy than our joy of sleeping. We become very grumpy, we don't sleep. If we don't sleep, if we are derived of sleep, not only derived of sleep, even if it's derived of sleep by 1 hour less than normal, we start to become grumpy, Normally you sleep 7 hours, and then for whatever reason, one day your mind thinking, oh, I didn't have the 7 hours sleep. Your mind starts grumpy, and so that is, but like someone like him, he gets so much joy from his practice, and so therefore, when there is so much joy in that, and so there's joy, so therefore you have no problem in practicing all the time. And when you have no problem in practicing, of course you are going to make much more progress in your path. Yes.
Is there a danger of becoming too attached to your practice?
Yes, possibly. In some cases it can be, in some cases it can be. But again, eventually, even you have to let go of your attachment, even your practice in long term. That is something that we need to overcome, being attachment. But it's better to being attached to your practice than being attached to sleep. Okay, and that is what I say. It's better to be attached to peace than being attached to violence. Attachment is both bad, whatever object it is, but still, I will prefer to have attachment to the peace than being attachment to the violence. It is better to be attached to the virtues than being attached to the non-virtues. It's better to have being attached to the practice than being attached to non-practice or sleepiness, And so, but through even you are attached to the practice, but because if you have a strong practice, and because you are attached, you have strong practice, but with working with that, you can overcome the attachment eventually itself, because you have the tools you are working on. And so you can overcome the attachment. So there is hope in that. There is no, yes, please.
But I mean, it sounds almost like you're equating joyous effort with attachment, which I don't think is the case.
Absolutely, yeah. Joyous effort and attachment totally different. Yeah, attachment has many. Attachment very specific mental factors. In terms of the root is ignorance, coming from ignorance. Totally mistaken mind, totally exaggerating the objects, quality of the objects that you are attached to, totally off from the realities. And so there are many those qualities in attachment, whereas joyous effort does not have those qualities. Yes?
Is there a danger of meditating too much? Until you're very tired, and it becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah, if that is becoming that, that is why I think when we went through Shantideva's chapter 7, joyous effort, and also I think I might have also touched on that a little bit when we were on Sunday, when we were going 37 verses of the Bodhisattvas, and where it comes to the joyous effort. One of the important to have that joyous effort in our meditation and practice, and for the long-term goodness, continuity of our practice, that we should not have too long where you start getting tiring. You should stop it before you get tired. Relax before it is too tiring. And you can again restart the meditations. You kind of energize yourself relax a little bit, and then again you do. So at the very beginning, do short sessions, more sessions. Short sessions, but more sessions. And so it shouldn't be extended too long where you start to feel tired. And it is all learning about our own mind, our own body, and see how much our body can take it, how much our mind can take it. And knowing, you know, oh, if I go more than this level of that, my body still feel tired. So knowing that, you try to stop before you reach that point. And sometimes your mind, again, start to become more tired. And again, before your mind start to become tired, you notice some symptoms, you know, with your observations. You know, those are the symptoms of you becoming tired. And before, when you notice those symptoms, even before it started, then you kind of try to relax, take a break, relax, and so that's important part. Yes. Well,
So essentially, it means that joyous effort isn't going to overwhelm completely tiredness. Sometimes, even though you have joyous effort, you still may get tired, may need to relax a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What you seem to be saying.
Yeah, joyous effort is, you know, while you enjoy whatever in your practice, your meditations, but at the same time, you know, that joyous effort, you might not be able to maintain it, you know. So whatever practice you are doing, you try to do with more joyfulness instead of feeling like it's a kind of without joyfulness. Try to learn to do more with joyfulness. And I always says, you know,